Liberté, Egalité, fraternité. France's national motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity is loudly and proudly bannered to the world. It was institutionalized in the 19th century, its own franc coins, and is among the first things taught in French classes all over the world. While for the most part these values are still reflective of France today, many instances challenge the reality of this phrase. One such example is the French youth's far-right extremism. Right-wing and left-wing politics are natural occurrences in nations. Even the Philippines had the right-wing versus left-wing political divide of pink versus red during the recently concluded presidential elections. Right-wing politics focuses on concepts such as social hierarchism, nationalism, preservation of cultures, adherence to religious practices, and the view that believes social or economic inequality is natural, inevitable, and is beneficial to society. Left-wing politics believes in liberalism, egalitarianism, social progressivism, counterculture like body modifications and tattoos, and the challenging themes of advances in sciences. Rightists would support the death penalty. Leftists would support abortion rights. Right-leaning parties would support jobs for locals instead of immigrants, while left-leaning parties would support civil union and same-sex marriage. An example of left-wing agenda in French history is the dissolution of the social hierarchy and letting people lead. An event that was very much true in the French Revolution when the citizens uprooted centuries-old institutions such as the monarchy and the feudal system. Notably, this was also the time when the motto was most significant. Basing it on the expressed values of the French Revolution, we can imply that the French were predominantly left-wing advocates, at least at the before times of history. Though France still banners its motto, centuries have passed since, and it's valid for our contemporary world to inquire its current execution. Egalité. One of the national motto of France that translates to equality, believing that all should be treated equally. We prompt the question, is this still practiced in the religious sects? Do they treat citizens regardless of their race, identity, and religion? The backbone of French's special brand of secularism is the separation of church and state, a concept often misunderstood as anti-religious and is increasingly weaponized against Islamic identities. To understand this tension, we need to look at France's religion demographics. France is an explosion of cultures. It is a country divided by a polarized religious communities. The major religions practiced in France includes Christianity, reaching for about 40% overall, with denominations including Catholicism, Protestantism, Eastern Orthodoxy. France also has a religious minority of Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Sikhism, among others. Each represent less than 6% of the population. Most significantly, over 40% identify to not have a religion, the agnostics and the atheists, making France a multi-confessional country. According to the Constitution of 1958, la France est une république indivisible, laïque, démocratique et sociale. France is an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic, guaranteeing that all citizens, regardless of their origin, race, or religion, are treated as equals before the law and respecting all religious beliefs. The concept of laïcité is central to how France defines itself and its integral relations between state and religion, while ensuring that religious neutrality and freedom of conscience are legally enshrined. Despite such, we hear a strong extremist polarity of opinion against Muslims.
Nous sommes la génération de la fracture ethnique, de la faillite totale du vivre ensemble, du métissage imposé.
In 2012, an ominous black and white video appeared online. It featured a series of people railing in French against the so-called forced mixing of races and what they describe as an explosion of anti-white racism.
Ne vous méprenez pas, ceci n'est pas un simple manifeste, c'est une déclaration de guerre.
It wasn't just a manifesto, it was a declaration of war. Generation Identity was born. Not long after the manifesto video was launched, Generation Identity filmed themselves on top of a mosque that was still under construction in the French city of Poitiers, lighting flares and chanting anti-Muslim slogans. Central to their movement is a thing we call meta-politics, where instead of the government dictating to society, they capture the culture in society and politics will happen downstream. And so, generation identity don't stand in elections or discourse in national press conferences. Instead, they do extremist stunts that shock people, but normalize things like anti-Muslim rhetoric in the public space. And with that normalization, with time, they change the culture to normalize Islamophobia. Generation identity pushes the so-called Great Replacement narrative, a conspiracy theory that believes Europe is being invaded and its people replaced by immigrants. In response to this so-called invasion, generation identity turned to using coded language to mask their dangerous and racist solution, which they termed remigration. Generation identity actually have this really pernicious idea that the way they would do this is essentially make life in these European countries so difficult for non-white people that they choose to leave. Hence, they will remigrate away from Europe. They want to make life difficult for people that are not from their culture, forbidding hijab use or forbidding the selling of halal food. Muslim women, for example, believe they should wear a headscarf. But in 2004, a law was passed banning the wearing of headscarves in French schools. It was couched as a general rule against ostensible signs of religion. So you couldn't wear a large Christian cross, for example. But it was largely aimed at the Muslim population of France. What results is, if people are not living on their own will because extremists have made their lives here costly, inconvenient, and nearly impossible, the government is forced to deport them. Conclusively, it is evident that politicians have weaponized the French concept of laïcité to foster a hostile environment towards French Muslims. The word, originally used to dictate freedom of religion and freedom of conscience, is now utilized to exploit the fear of the people and vilify the French Muslim minority. Policies created under this guise aim to further stereotype all Muslims as terrorists and further isolating an already marginalized minority. While many people have pointed at terrorist events as justification for these policies, it is evident that Islamophobic sentiment has been prevalent in France since long before. The country's past as a colonizer of Muslim Arabs and North Africans has played a heavy hand in these new separatism bills. Muslims in France are already heavily discriminated against, with many resigned to live in banlieues with low chances of employment. Muslim youth are also being discriminated against, with their ability to express their religious identity tarnished. Ultimately, the legitimization of Islamophobic through the weaponization of laïcité policy has resulted in a drastic increase of hate crimes and will further alienate vulnerable people and push them towards radicalism rather than away. In this instance, the values of liberté, egalité, and fraternité crumbles. No freedom to express one's religion, no equality in the government and societal treatment, and no community to turn to. This is the normalized reality of those in the Islamic sects in France.